Hello and welcome to the Ireland podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. Now, education about and local engagement with rivers and water catchments are vital for empowering communities, kids and parents to be custodians of their local environments. And one group that has been doing fantastic work in this area since the 1990s has been Streamscapes. It came about after Paul Kearney and Mark Boyden set up the Coomhola Salmon Trust in West Cork in 1989 and evolved then into Scapes, working with local communities and schools in the area of aquatic and biodiversity education. Mark joins us on this week's episode to tell us more about the work that they do, the importance of empowering local communities, and how it can help with the next generation in realising the importance of their environment and river catchments near them. But first, Tom, how has the fishing been?
Good man, Dara. Yeah, so with all my predictions that, okay, it was a lot colder this winter compared to last year, it's going to be later, well, you can wrap that up and throw that away because I think duckfly came up roughly within a day of when it did last year. Duckfly was up, and duckfly was up in certain spots here by Paddy's Day. We were out, we had a couple of lads out, and it was primarily, they come for a bit of pulling. And they were the 13th and 14th of March. And actually, they did catch, they catch on buzzer one of the mornings. There was a small hatch, and they just chucked out a couple of buzzers and caught on duckfly. Now, it wasn't up fully then, but it was starting. So as we speak.
How long would you expect the hatch to last?
It's normally between 2 to 3 weeks. And a good one, you'll get 3 weeks out of it.
So my reckoning, because I'm supposed to be going fishing with you on Friday.
Yep, woohoo.
And it started on, not to jinx it, it started around Paddy's.
Yeah.
It's going to finish on Thursday at midnight.
Yeah, Thursday, which is tomorrow. You know, we're recording this. It's not live, but so it probably wouldn't be midnight on Thursday. But I'd say about 9 o'clock Friday morning.
Just as I'm pulling up.
Yeah, so now the only thing that's probably lengthened a bit, it's been very cold. Oh, yeah, I tell you, there was one day there earlier this week, right? The morning looked like a lovely spring morning, so I didn't put thermals on or anything. And it was one of the few times I've had to do it. I had to go for a shower when I came home. I was that cold. I was frozen. I caught a couple of fish.
What's the air
The air temperature hasn't really hit 11 or 12.
That's funny because down here now, well, this is according to the car now and Alexa, 15 degrees.
Yeah, we haven't hit that at all. It's been cold.
Warm.
No, it hasn't been freezing, all right?
Yeah, but it's not.
Yeah, and I think that's lengthened it. I mean, what are we now? We're like we're the end of March. I still think there's easily, like, to be honest, yeah, you might get to 5 o'clock on Friday. No, but I honestly think there's spots I haven't seen it hatching in yet that I think they will hatch. It's a couple of places I'd know that'll be later. It's interesting, like even amongst the duckfly, there are certain holes that are earlier than others.
Is that to do with certain holes are more shaded, so they would even be still colder than other parts, so that as it's warming up kind of in the start of April?
I would say you're probably right. There's something to do there, because I'd imagine like temperature is probably the optimum thing that, you know, that brings them on. And I would say certain ones either shaded or more exposed to the more open body of water, less susceptible to, let's say, in shallower water where the sun will warm them up quicker. It could be ones that will be more adjacent to big open bodies of water and take that bit longer to warm up. I mean, it's a bit like, I've always said it here, there's a huge, this time of year, you know, carb is more shallow than mask, and that's why at this time of year, mask is always way colder.
Yes,
because it takes that bit longer. But definitely, and generally as well, the later ones tend to be that little bit deeper.
So how was this week like in terms of...
This week was, it's been patchy, but we've had some good fishing.
Really? Tell us, give us an insight into some of it.
Well, no, the only thing is, up until the middle of this week, I was finding really good fish. Like, and I'm sort of wondering, where all the average size fish got, but the last couple of days, they've shown up. So much so that we haven't had, didn't have any, you know, lumps, as we call them. By lumps, I mean, you know, 2.5, 3 pound fish. Yeah. So it's been decent if you get right conditions. Like sometimes you know, if you're at the buzzers, you don't want a flat cam either.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
You know, because all right, you catch them in it, but you know, the boat remains static, which is grand if you want to plug yourself on one hole. but it's easy fish out that place. Whereas if you get a nice little ripple moving you along, you creep up and fish, unsuspectingly. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's been getting that. We've had horrible winds earlier on last week, north and northeast. So I think
Like
that's
last
going
year,
to.
was it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, the last couple of days it switched southerly and southwest. Yesterday was flat cam, but we did get ripples during the day. But yeah, no. To be honest, it hasn't hit. There hasn't been any BAM evening, so there's been no evening work as such yet. By that I mean, and that normally happens after the times change.
Yeah, exactly. Which of course is going to be this weekend.
Mm.
So, are you expecting it to pick up then, kind of next week?
I think what's going to pick up next week is probably your evening dry fly fishing with them, which
Okay.
is great. I mean, it's class stuff. Like, I mean, you're talking early April, first week in end of March, early April, and fishing to covering rising fish with rise.
Wow.
It's absolutely fab. I love it, but you need BAM evenings, which you don't always get this time of year.
Yeah.
But if you
Yeah.
do get it and the wind drops, and the next thing, all the adults come down. Like, actually, there's a lot of fly around and I didn't take a picture, but over one of the islands, was it yesterday? It must have been the cam day. I saw and it looks like plumes of smoke.
Yeah.
Just loads of duck fly going up. So, and they'll be waiting to come back down. So when they come down, that's great. So at the moment, to be honest, with you, it's primarily buzzer fishing.
And from what you're saying, it's kind of patchy, I suppose is the best word to kind of
Yeah, it
describe it,
is.
is
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
generally, and then last week, what I was finding, it was amazing. It's broadened out a bit because it has got that bit warmer. But when it started, like just after Paddy's Day, it was out a good bit. You got a 1 hour window.
Yes.
That was it. You got a 1 hour window. Now you could be lucky, and to be honest, you were getting 2 or 3 takes in that 1 hour window. You'd be lucky, get them all, and that's it. And then you could say to yourself, "Geez, I've had a good day." Do you
Yes.
know?
Yes. Yes. And
Yeah.
tell me this, when you get that 1 hour window and say you're in a certain spot, and the conditions are good and
Mm.
the flies are hatching, they're coming off, but say you're in a certain spot and they're not rising, they're not taken. Is that a kind of catch 22?
Oh,
Do you
oh, it is.
stay?
Yeah, it really does your head in.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you'd be there thinking, all right, they're not going here. Do I stay here
Yeah. Or
or do I
waste your
go to another
time.
place?
And
I
by the
generally
time,
move. I
yeah.
generally move. But there is, I have heard it so many times. Oh God, I saw you leaving Paul's Island there. I went in behind you, and geez,
Yeah.
I three of a shot, and I've genuinely said, when I left there, I didn't see a thing,
Yeah.
and it can,
Yeah.
but you see, it can work the other way.
Look at the
You
draw.
know, yeah, it's luck of the draw, but no, it's a thing. Like, it's hard to know. I mean, thing you should always go with, and my dad always said it to me: never leave rising fish.
Yes.
Yeah, never leave rising fish. Although it's been interesting now this week. There was one day and we covered a lot of fish and didn't turn any of them. And the fish we caught were all on the blind.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
Interesting.
that can happen too. That can happen too.
What's the kind of cast? What are you putting out? Like, so what's some
So
of the
we're
typical
fishing
cast?
fishing buzzers. The guys this week have been fishing team of three.
Right.
Now, I know when we were doing the masterclass before, Mike always favors four fly cast, and I favor a four fly cast too. But a tangle of the four fly cast can reduce your fishing time. I will be
Yes,
honest with you.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think if there's any time of buzzer fishing that you probably a three fly cast might, or where a four fly cast isn't as huge an advantage, it's duck fly time because I think they tend to be that bit higher in the water. And the advantage of
Right.
a four
Gotcha.
fly cast is it's the extra weight gets you down that bit more. So for the other buzzers, the Campbell and things like that, it is an advantage. But I think probably with the duck fly, I mean, I'm just trying to think this week. I have to, by the way, I have to do my diary as well. Oh God. But only one of the rods this week was on a four fly cast. 6 foot, 6 or 7 foot at the first, 5 and 5.
17. That's my
5 and 5. So
maths. Yeah.
16, 17 foot cast.
And what buzzers? What do you kind of just mix and match in terms of
Right.
colors,
To,
or
to
how
be
do you
honest
go?
with you, there's been a complete there isn't one I'd say, oh, it's working. But they've
Yeah.
all been the quills have worked and the black buzzers. But the usual thing is 10 on the point, two 12s. 10 on the point, six it down more, and then two 12s above it. I think there's been one or two of them that have caught a couple of fish, but lads are catching on every buzzer on the cast. As long as it's not outlandish and garish, quills are always going to work. But I think it's more important to have a good setup of a 10 and two 12s.
Right. Well, I'm looking forward to it, Tom. What could go
Yeah, it's
wrong?
great. Now, what could go wrong apart from the weather forecast?
Any
The
what?
wind is
What's the
it's
set for
forecast fairly
Friday?
windy.
Oh, is it? Jeez.
It's yeah, it
That'll be
is,
more
yeah.
than a ripple.
Yeah, that is that. Now the only thing is direction is blowing us offshore. It's blown from the shore for up here, which is probably going to help. Like you're always searching for shelter anyway. We're talking about, but we'll definitely be searching for it anyway. Yeah, it's promised fairly windy, but that's it. I mean, quite often you'll pull up. Yeah, if you get a nice sheltered bay, yeah, pull in, drop an anchor. As long as I never mind anchoring in windy days like that, and particularly if you're not in the way of somebody drifting. So if you go right to the head of a bay and you're the backboat in there, you can just hold there and wait. That time, like we could be doing a waiting game. You could be just sitting in a spot. So you pick a couple of spots and you just sit and wait. I mean, there's a guy comes here fishing, and that's all he does. He just pulls into a spot and he waits, and you can nearly time him. He'll give a place 20 minutes, half an hour. And if nothing moves, he'll move to another place.
And just
So
waits.
that's yeah, a little bit of patience. But no, looking forward to it. Fingers
Yeah,
crossed.
and it's going to be my first time out. I haven't been out yet this year, so
Oh, yeah, that's right, actually. God, this
well,
must be one of the latest times.
yeah, watch the back of your head as I'm getting
Oh, well,
the rusty casts out of my system.
well, if you see me placing a bucket on my head,
Duck, not fly, duck.
that's fine.
Oh no, it should be good. Should be
Yeah,
good. Looking
looking
forward to
forward
it.
to it now.
Look, we might do a catch up in the next week or two, maybe just to get a kind of a review overall.
Yeah, we'll actually, yeah.
Mike, if you're listening, answer the phone.
Are you there, Mike?
We'll
Hello,
find
hello,
out.
Mike. Are you there? Are you there, Mike?
Comes up as don't answer. Right, but look, before we get back to this week's guest, Mark Boyden
Yeah.
from Streamscapes.ie, I just also wanted to mention the Irish Youth Fly Fishing Team fundraising raffle with prizes of a lake boat, fly rods, engine, hotel stays, angling vouchers, all up for grabs. Tickets are €50 each and they're limited to just 500. So, on all proceeds go towards the youth team costs for attending the World Youth Fly Fishing Championships in the USA later this year. So, it's all for a great cause. Tickets are on sale now from Frank Dempsey. He's on 087 235 1830. We'll also include the details for Frank and the email and the phone number in the show notes, and we'll post up on it as well. So just to remind you that the tickets for that raffle are now available, all for great cause for the Irish Youth Fly Fishing Team going to the World Championships in the USA. Right, let's hear now from Mark Boyden from Streamscapes.ie to tell us how it all started.
Paul Kearney and I started Streamscapes and back in 1989. And we'd been kind of talking. Well, what we did was we started Coomhola Salmon Trust. And so, and we were actually involved in stocking salmon into rivers in the southwest. And and that quickly grew into an educational exercise because we I mean essentially stocking really should be only a very, very last resort measure. I mean, like there's the thing that if you build it, they will come. If you get your habitat right, salmon will appear and find decent habitat and multiply themselves. Stocking really, it's the basis of a fantastic kind of community engagement educational exercise. And so literally when we'd be, say, catching broodstock under Section 14 licenses and one thing another, then we'd be working with local riparian owners, farmers, but we'd also invite along drift netters at the time, draft netters, tourist interests, angling interests, um, teachers, students, and we turn it into kind of a community exercise. And so literally we'd be pulling seine nets, seining a pool, catching broodstock live, taking them back to the hatchery live and treating them well. And and literally when they were ready, we'd we'd be stripping the eggs and fertilizing them, but even that, we'd invite those community members along to be there for the breeding, and then that would be kind of, autumn. That would be December. Autumn, we're catching the fish. October, November, maybe even into December. December, we'd be breeding, and then we'd call everybody back around St. Patrick's Day when they're hatching, and literally, we'd have people who would have killed many thousands of salmon, but they had never seen an elephant wriggle out of a shell. And so, it's great to kind of close that circle and share that knowledge and one thing another as well. And and then discussions naturally occur where you're talking about, the needs of the salmon, the environmental needs of the salmon, and one thing another. So it just became a great, as I say, basis for discussing environmental awareness at a very basic level.
The stocking, how successful was it? Because I know obviously now there's, and I think you're right, it's kind of a last resort that people will always say it's, you want to go for habitat first and try and improve that first and to encourage the numbers to come in. So was it successful, and have your thoughts on stocking changed?
A fellow said to me one day, we were releasing fed fry into an upper tributary of the Coomhola River, and and one of those, volunteers assisting just said, you know, of every thousand that we're letting go here, how many will come back? And I just said, well, hopefully none, because stocking is playing God, and stocking and we fall into this trap of looking at a problem and thinking that we can solve it by throwing numbers at it. It's a basic misconception of how science has addressed things over the last century or two. And and so, and I know it's solved a lot of other problems in terms of health and hunger and one thing and another, but stocking is kind of, um, as I say, the biggest value of it was educational. We did with the Marine Institute, we did keep back some, rear them up to smolt stage, and microtag them and let them go. Now we did have returns, um, because the whole microtagging procedure was that you clip the adipose fin and you inject a binary coded bit of this was the technique in the day, a binary coded bit of stainless steel wire into the nose, and if an angler caught a a fish that was missing its adipose fin, and we'd let them know, and we'd distribute little envelopes. Then you cut off the nose, put it into alcohol, put it into the envelope, and get it to us. And we'd send it back to Abbottstown at the time. And so the thing was there, there were some returns, and some anglers caught it here. And also, I should say that any legally landed salmon um, anywhere at the time, right up the coast, right up the western seaboard, but also up in the Faroes and here and there, that the practice was for a metal detector to go over the box of fish, and literally it would just pick up that tiny bit of stainless wire. And so then, tags would be retrieved that way as well. But it was never about, the problem is that if you if a given river has 500 pair of salmon returning to it every year, um, or just to make the maths easier, say 5 pair, so 10 fish. 5 females could produce, let's say, 20,000 eggs. And if you're looking at 1% of that, you're talking about maybe 20 fish coming back. Or in other words, you're kind of to the river, and maybe there's more predation or loss to angling, but you're ending up with a sustainable run of 10 fish per year, which is what that river can support in this model. If suddenly you were to take um, four of those fish, two females, and achieve, which you can do, a 90% survival to smolt stage, 90% plus, and let them go, then literally suddenly, you're talking about 7,500 fish that you're letting go at smolt stage. And there's anything from a 2% to a 20% chance that they might come back. And then suddenly you've loaded your river with fish who are not genetically representative of the stock that's in that river. So that's the biggest danger of stocking, is that you dilute the natural genetics that are in the river, and you don't know the consequences of that downstream, so to speak, for many years, because you just end up with kind of a problem though. And so stocking is not an answer unless your river is extinct. Now, it can be argued that, well, if your stock is extinct in a given river, give it time, and the black salmon that we've referred to earlier, one of them or two of them are going to find that, and they're going to sense that habitat, and they're going to utilize it. But say in a example like the Rhine, there was a big Irish input into restocking the Rhine. It was coordinated by Ken Whelan and others, and we actually did contribute to that. So literally, there was research that revealed that the River Island in Skibbereen had been stocked with River Rhine salmon back around the late 1800s and into the early 1900s. There was an effort to restock the island. It was going through probably what was just naturally a few down years, but some people involved thought that maybe they could kickstart a recovery by stocking, and they thought, oh, let's go for the Rhine salmon. They actually imported for 5, 6 years on the trot, eyed over from the Rhine. And anecdotally, what I hear is that they were packed in sphagnum moss and shipped as quickly as possible from the Rhine to Skibbereen. A hatchery was set up in Bunalun upstream, and these fish were reared on and released. Now, when the German fisheries people got on and said, "Oh, look, maybe there's a genetic remnant in River Island fish in relation to the Rhine," and I just shook my head and I said, "Look, this is more romantic than genetic, but let's go for it." And Ken Whelan assented and drove it all on, and of course Ken would have been procuring eggs from other places, Delphi and Burshul and places, and so there was this Irish contingent of salmon eggs which went to the Rhine, and so there are actually ex-Irish salmon migrating up the Rhine now. So that's one example where stocking might be allowable, if you really want to kickstart.
Did we ever discover, was there a remnant in that River Island salmon that did actually date back to the original Rhine?
No, no.
Oh.
I mean, as far as I'm aware, there was no Rhine genetics in those.
You've ruined it now, Mark. You've ruined the romance of it. It would have made for a beautiful story.
Yeah.
But tell me this then, going back to the Coomhola Salmon Trust, actually just on that, how is it now as a river? Is there much of a run? Is it closed? Is there much salmon on it now?
Can I come back to that? Because I will just stay with that thread before I forget about Coomhola Salmon Trust and Streamscapes formation, because the thing was that I suppose I'd been involved in environmental activism for some years and even a couple of decades by the late 80s. And I really saw the need for environmental education. Now it's everywhere you look, and it's fantastic. But in the 80s, environmental education still wasn't on the map. There still wasn't dedicated environmental education in the either the primary or secondary schools curriculum. And so there really was a need for it. And the other thing was that it always struck me was that strife is endemic to environmental issues in general. And so not only did we have to find a way around that, a proper approach, a proper ethos to ground environmental education in, but also we had to change the narrative of the whole top-down thing that applied and still applies to some extent, but certainly it was everything then. The state told you what to do. There were three kind of wings. There was policy, there was legislation, and there was enforcement. If you polluted, you'd be in court. And I suppose what we felt was that, and people, I'm talking farmers, foresters, one thing another, were told what to do. And I suppose what we perceived was that actually, you know, why not change the top-down dynamic? Why not credit people with innate intelligence of their own? And I mean, most of the farmers I've met down the years, and I've farmed myself, but they know the birds, they know the story with the rivers and one thing another. And and if you actually explain the issues, then they'll they're very capable of offering solutions. I know I'm speaking in an idealized way now, but the fact of the matter is that you can if you approach people in the right way, you can get them on side. And so that was it, was that change that whole dynamic and and try to elicit solutions to environmental problems from within the communities. And so, yeah, that was all quite revolutionary at the time.
Are
And
you surprised though, Mark? Like, because and what I love about the ethos is community engagement because I'm a big believer in that. Were you surprised at how little community engagement existed, and is it changing? And I just give an example here where I live in Tipperary, and my three kids are in the primary school in a small village, and it's beside a church, and there's a little river. Salmon spawn in that river. Brown trout are in that river. It's a small little. It's probably only 10 feet wide. And it's probably ankle deep, if that. And I don't think there's any engagement. The kids pass over that bridge twice a day, and I'd love to know what engagement or information or knowledge or even just visiting the river to see what's in it and education is about it. I'd say it's very, very limiting. And because it's not part of the curriculum, shall we say, or whatever, but I think there needs to be more of that kind of local engagement between education and communities to say, here's this resource we have, here's this river, there's so much to be learned. Because you see it yourself, I'm sure, when kids actually see what creepy crawlies are in under the rocks and fish that are darting away, they get absolutely fascinated by this world of water.
absolutely. I suppose that's what we based our approach on was revelation of wonder. I mean, that was the way to get through to people was, not to go lecturing them, but literally get them into boots, get them into the river, do some kick sampling, talk about the life cycles of mayfly, of freshwater pearl mussels, of salmon and trout themselves, and and then that really, that really opens the whole discussion up. That enables the discussions to take place. And so that was kind of the practicality or the methodology of Streamscapes engagements. And and so, yeah, I mean, we kind of, went on with that. With regards to today, Streamscape still does that, but obviously, it's a small organization and it's limited. Now, having said that, we've produced Streamscapes projects in at least 25 counties, north and south, and some cross-border catchments as well. over the last 35, 36 years. And Streamscapes will go on and do that. But who's really filling that gap now is LawPro. LawPro are doing fantastic public engagement work up and down the country. And not only that, but they're encouraging and supporting financially and morally lots of local groups, whether they're tidy towns or whether they're other kind of local environmental initiatives along the lines of Streamscapes. And so they're actually enabling them. And the only thing is that I think it should be endowed much better than it is. I mean, there might be 15, I don't know the current numbers, but there could be maybe 15 community water officers, 20 at the max for all of the state. And I think there's a case for being 50 to 100. I think there should be, ideally, we've got the country's been divided into 46 so-called catchment units, which several of them are multi-river. But I mean, literally, there should be at least one LawPro community water officer in each of those catchment districts. And in the larger catchments, there could be 3 or 4. I mean, something like the Liffey, you could have 4 or 5, and they'd be full time going to schools and community groups and one thing or another.
But are you surprised though, Mark? I'm always disappointed by the kind of lack of local engagement, unless, like I said, like that there is a need for a law pro officer. That like I always talk about. I love the example of Ken Whelan when I remember talking to him about the Dodder and how I think it's the River Dodder Action Group it was called, and how they got the communities involved. So, there's a beautiful walkway, pathway, running along beside the Dodder. And every weekend, local communities, they're not anglers, but they live beside the river and they want to see it kept well. And they organize litter cleanups every weekend. And people, from all the communities get involved. It's that kind of involvement that you want to see, where there's a kind of an ownership they feel as part of it. And I still think it's lacking in a lot of areas. Do you think a lot of communities?
It's got a long way to go to achieving the universality that it deserves. But having said that, you know, going back to the baseline, which was the 80s, where there was nothing, to today, where, I mean, a lot of places I go, I do see things happening. And like I say, a lot of it is driven by local tidy towns groups. And then LawPro even, help support a special category within Tidy Towns awards in terms of water quality and water awareness. And so that's it's like mechanisms like that really help steer awareness, because if suddenly a Tidy Towns group goes, oh, we could earn more points by paying attention to our river, then that's great, because then suddenly they will put a subcommittee on looking at how they can address that. Because I mean, literally, it's only 10 years ago, tidy towns groups would see some weeds on the parapet of a bridge and they'd be spraying it, and now they realize that that's not it. And also tidy towns themselves, the wider organization is coming to the realization that the tidy towns shouldn't be based on sterility. They should be based on kind of a high degree of wildlife in amongst a human culture and society. So that balance is coming. And so from that baseline of the 80s till now, I'm hugely heartened. But I acknowledge there's a long way to go before we achieve that kind of more widespread knowledge. It should be built into the curriculum, and the curriculum is changing as well.
Well, that was actually my next question, is surely more should be done from an education perspective in the schools.
Yes, I mean, the new curriculum is taking in not only a broadening of science, but also a a practical application of science. And so, and also the whole thing of Antashka, the Green Flags programs and things like that, they're helping out. And, you find schools so um, enthusiastic about achieving their next flag. And quite often, we would even tailor Streamscapes engagements with given schools to work in whatever green flag they were working on and help them develop, say, a local biodiversity plan or what they're doing in terms of their own engagement with water, things like that.
But I would actually also say, Mark, as well as, and in fairness, the work with the blue ways and the green ways around the country, I think has been nothing short of revolutionary in terms of you see how people enjoy now the outdoors, whether it's walking, running, cycling. And as a byproduct of that, they appreciate the environment more. They appreciate the river more. If there's pollution, if there's rubbish on the river, I'm sure like again, there's the blue way down by the River Shore from Kerr, Clonmel and Kilsheelan. And it's a fabulous stretch to be able to go for kilometers and kilometers. If there was anything not right there, people would be quick to get onto the council to fix it, which is great, and I think we're starting to kind of become more outdoors environment, but I'd love to see it more at the primary level and up, primary school level and up, and get kids more involved, because I think you get them at that age, you can get them for life.
I suppose a lot of Streamscapes work was therefore, tuned towards exercises, experiences that would really make the lessons indelible as well, and really affect lifelong behavioral change. And so, like for instance, when we were still right through the 90s and into the noughties, we would have salmon eggs, a supply of salmon eggs, and we were continuing to stock in small ways, but as I say, as educational exercises. But like for instance, what we would do is we made up, for instance, a dozen little aquaria, and then some filtration units and one thing or another, so that we could actually hatch salmon eggs in the classroom. And so we would have done this. Oh, geez, I'd say we did it in a few hundred schools. Um, and or alternately trout eggs even. But yeah, up in Fermanagh and places we were using trout from a local hatchery with wild parentage who were being bred for stocking purposes. But the whole thing was that the kids could hatch salmon in the classroom and just actually see that whole thing with their own eyes. And then what we would do, because they're delicate, um, we'd take the Olivans young fry back to the hatchery. We would have been hatching them in kind of February, March, April, and then we just rear them on a little bit more, let them get a bit hardy. And then we would do things like have festivals in June for a given catchment. And and so like literally we might have 500, 600 people in an inch field. And there would be all kinds of like exhibits of eco art that the schools had done in support of the Streamscapes engagement project. And there would be, music and dancing and one thing and another. But the culmination of these festivals was that literally people would queue at the riverside. They'd be given a jam jar with a salmon fry in it, and they'd let it go. And so, because so much of engagement is kind of, it's too complicated. Environment has four syllables, and fish only has one. So it's great. You let a fish go, and then forevermore, even if you're just only passing over the bridge, you might wonder, oh, I wonder how my fish is getting on. And then you might have a stake in the welfare of that river. And it establishes, a personal bond. And so we were doing that for years and years, but also, like any old way that we could, like literally back to the River Island, we did a big project that was leader sponsored, and there was support from Cork County Council and others. Geez, it must be 14 years ago or so. It was 2011 or so, and like literally, we and I suppose this kind of embodied the Streamscapes engagement ideal. We dealt with one catchment, and so the River Island is roughly 500 square K, and at the time there were 22 schools, including on the offshore islands, say Sherkin and Cape Clear, and there were 3 secondary schools amongst those. And so we engaged with all of those schools with practical field trips and also eco art exercises as a second engagement, because that whole tactile experience of translating the lessons into something handmade is a really crucial and sometimes neglected step in really taking in information. But then also we would have engaged with half a dozen community and voluntary groups, and then half a dozen corporate groups. And so literally I suppose this is the core of the Streamscapes, methodology, is that we were aiming to directly engage what we would call a small critical mass of the population in direct experience. And that small critical mass is usually around 4 to 6%. Like literally, I think the catchment population there between Skibbereen, rural areas, villages, takes in Drina, Drimalig, etc. I think it's around 13,000 people. We actually had 800 people who got into the river and who went through more or less the Streamscapes engagement. And then we had the festival, and at the festival, because there was no local stock at the time, and we couldn't let fish go, what we did was we printed the local OSI map on vinyl in a really big piece. I mean, literally it was 6 foot by 4 foot, and we cut it into a jigsaw, and every participating school or group got the piece of the jigsaw that was nearest them in the catchment. And literally for the festival, everybody had to bring their piece of the map, their piece of the jigsaw. And we fit together. And then people understand that they're part of a catchment together, that they're part of a community that's related by water. And so, and people living downstream of you are dependent upon you minding your water. And then we do things like, because of the important role of best practice in the home, in terms of what's going down our sinks and drains and loos and one thing and another, we'd actually encourage students to, because we're viewing, our drains and toilets as tributaries to the river, we're saying, look, give them names, make up names for, make it clear. And so, like that, I suppose that was a lot of it, was, convey that best practice and somehow find the means to root people's consciousness in the land, in the valley, in the catchment around them, and to appreciate the wonders, and to kind of more or less be stewards of that environment and those species.
Custodians of it, isn't it? I think that's what I always like to say about kind of salmon anglers on the river. You're custodians of it. Like, and actually, my next question was going to be, how do you define success? And I think you gave a very good example of it there. But I like, actually, you had a quantification around it, 4 to 6%. So there, at least there's a kind of you can say, well, look, if we can hit that amount of people within the catchment, we know we've hit a certain mass that can hopefully have an effect. And I think that's what you've just described, which is to say, is that's kind of an example of what success should look like for what Streamscapes does and for community engagement with catchments.
Yeah, I suppose the final the final piece to that engagement strategy is a local publication. And so, like that's been kind of part and parcel of the approach these last many years. You can go on to the Streamscapes website, streamscapes.ie/resources, and you can see like 40 plus publications that we've done there. And some of them are generic. I mean, there's even the Salmon Sanctuaries booklet, and there's a short 6-minute video that's back up to that. But most of those booklets are place-based local publications, and they're from up north. I mean, literally from the River Erne and the Ulster Blackwater right down to the River Island, but over to Wexford, down in Kerry. Um, we've worked with lots of communities to actually produce these local based publications, and I think that's a huge thing because the whole idea is to identify people within the community, whether they're writers or artists or photographers or whatever skills they can bring, and get a good snapshot of what's going on in the local valley and what people are doing, and get as wide a representation as possible. Don't just leave it to the environmentalists. Get the farmers writing, get the foresters writing, get lots of different points of view, and literally what you end up with is a self-authored booklet about where people are at, and they can demonstrate their pride in local water bodies and the whole, all of the local environment, and also what measures they see that are important to, bring to bear to restore and conserve local habitats and species.
Do you worry because of the digital world that we live in, that it's getting harder to engage people and the kids especially? Or do you find that it's such revelation to them that when they're away from their screen and they're, getting to experience wildlife and this underwater world, that it has a real impact on them? Or do you think then they just go back to their screens and forget all about it?
I suppose it's a bit of both. I mean, certainly when a school class comes down to the river and goes in there, they don't think of their phones for an hour at least. I mean, because I suppose that's it. You have to have fun, and you have to establish a joy. I think it was Dorothy Day who said you can't depress people into action. Um, you have to celebrate what's there, and that makes the case then for wanting to know more about it, and then to make the effort to preserve it. Um, but definitely for that hour that the students or adults are in the river. Um, it's such a new experience, and there is such wonder going on, that people aren't thinking of their phones. And literally, like 35 years later, I'll still have people come up to me, who are kind of in their late 40s now, but who were on a Streamscape school field trip, and they'll say, "Geez, I never forgot that day," And so that's it. You have to, you have to kind of, establish that joy and that reason to conserve things, but have fun along the way, and so. And as to kind of the digital world of today, there's a lot of people. Sorry, I can't think of anything offhand, but I do know that there's apps being created, to kind of to so you can take your phone, if you must, down to a river, and you can find out things about that river by having your phone there. You can also upload your own findings. I mean, things like the National Biodiversity Center database is online, and so like we would bring that into Streamscapes courses over the last several years, where literally you're teaching the kids you find a flattened mayfly, and so you upload that, take a picture of it, upload it to the database, share that, and so I think there's applications for that technology as well. And I know sorry, I just can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I know that there's lots of different apps now that are place-based.
Yeah, no, 100%. But like, there's a place for them, and there's a wealth of information and useful resources out there that you can use. But I always say, put the phone in the pocket as well, and don't forget to actually get your hands and feet wet and dirty, because that's the best way to experience it.
Definitely. Yeah.
I'm moving on. Just the final part I wanted to chat to you about, Mark. You've stepped back as CEO. So, what's the hopes and plans for the future development of Streamscapes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of, you know, I'm still there as a consultant, but fresh blood now, new people, new staff coming in. So, some old staff are there as well, but there's new board. And I mean, I suppose, we did come up with a viable engagement methodology, as I say, and backed up by what I think is a sound ethos. And so, and also, I suppose, we build up so many contacts, through either local authorities, state agencies, angling clubs, tidy towns groups, again, schools, and we got a good name. And so there's the basis to carry it on. And so I'm stepping back. I'm there as a consultant. I'm still going to be running aspects of the Streamscapes publishing house, but there's whole new directions that they're going in as well. I mean, you'd probably be aware, Dara, of the Blue Dot Catchments initiative, an initiative of LawPro and the department, and literally it's a dedicated unit within LawPro. And um, I suppose you'd have to trace it to Ireland's implementation of the Water Framework Directive in 2001, 2002. And so what was decided was that to use that as the baseline, go back then, and in 2002, Ireland still had over 500 pristine water bodies. In 2025, we're down to 20. And so, in fairness to the state and to the department, they've gone back to that 2002 baseline and have said, we've got work to do. We have to we have to restore these water bodies back to pristine condition. That is one of the principal requirements of the Water Framework Directive of the European legislation, is that water bodies are not allowed to decrease in quality from that date. Now, and they have all through Europe, but efforts are being made. And in Ireland, that has become what's called the Blue Dot program. And so it's a really great aspiration. I back it 100%. And as a matter of fact, we did work a bit with assisting with developing a template for Blue Dot publications. First one was actually on the Coomhola River, which is one of those 20 pristine water bodies that are left. And then also we worked with LawPro and Galway County Council in Connemara to engage with 10 Blue Dot water bodies there, both with local schools there and also with a publication in English and Oscailga. And so, and those publications are all available on that Streamscapes website as well. And so Coomhola Salmon, Streamscapes will continue to work with Blue Dot engagement and support LawPro and support the department in that. I think it's a huge area of potential for going into those communities and helping them realize what they had a very short time ago, and helping to restore that pristine condition.
Well, I can only wish you and the new CEO, Maggie McColgan,
Yeah.
the very best of luck with it. You've had a lifetime of conservation and environmentalism, and the impact you've had with schools and wider communities is to be applauded and thanked. And let's hope we can do a lot more for the future, because, like you said, we're coming from a a low baseline in the 80s. It's growing, and hopefully we can keep growing it and keep educating the next generation about the importance of environment and engagement with local river catchments. So, Mark Boyden, best of luck with your semi-retirement, shall we call it that, and continued success with Streamscapes for the future. And for people who want more information, Streamscapes.ie, and that's where you can get all the resources that Mark referenced, and you can have a look at the work that they do as well. So, Mark, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Dara. All the best.
Our thanks to Mark for joining us on the show. And don't forget to rate, review and follow the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Plus, you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com as well as on Instagram. And myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.